So you're looking to buy your first Porsche Cayman or Boxster, but you're worried about how much it costs you. And if you've watched this channel regularly, you'll know that I've had a little bit of a nightmare with this car. Over the past 4 years, I've spent tens of thousands of pounds maintaining it. And in this video, I wanted to do a buyer's guide revisiting everything I've learned over the last 4 years and share with you some of the things that you need to look for when buying one of these amazing cars. Now, I think it's worth starting at the front of this car, working our way back and showing you all the things that I know go wrong on these and things that you should get to prevent things going wrong. The first thing I want to mention is these front grills. So I had these fitted a few years after I bought the car. They're really super important if you want to protect the aircon radiators that sit behind them. Aircon radiators on these cars can often break down, get a stone through them and need replacing, and you're looking at the cost of around £1,000, so it's certainly not a cheap job. A quick simple modification with these Unsport grills, you can prevent stones hitting them, prolonging the life of the radiators. And it is worth mentioning that if you have a Tiptronic like this one, you need to get the centre grille as well. I've currently got that, yet to fit it, but there is actually a radiator behind there to protect the gearbox. On the normal cars, the manual cars, there's nothing there, so you don't necessarily need the centre grille unless you want it to look better. Moving round to the side of the car, we've got wheels and tyres. These are big expenses on Porsches. The tyres are not only really big, these are 19 inches, but they're also quite wide, meaning the price of them, well, they're quite a lot of money, let's be honest. Only premium tyres are generally fitted to these cars, and this particular car has got Michelin PS4S tyres fitted. They're N-rated, which means they're designed for the car. They're the correct tyres for the car, and it's something that people look for when buying them. Any other tyres fitted mean the car probably has been maintained on a budget and could be a warning sign and something to look for. The other thing worth mentioning is that, of course, when you buy a used car, you check the tread on the tyres. That's obvious. These cars often don't do that many miles, so it's worth checking the date as well, making sure the tyres aren't too old. When I bought this car, the tyres were 6 years old because it had barely covered any miles every single year. The tyres were dried out and I had to replace them at the cost of £1,000. One thing that's not necessarily obvious straight away is coolant leaks. Now, this affects pretty much all cars of this age, but these are really susceptible to it. And what is called the coolant crossover pipes. It's where the metal and the rubber meet, they degrade, and essentially you just start losing coolant. The places to look for is right at the back, just near the gearbox, and also at the front of the car, just behind the wheel. You can see a couple of the coolant pipes coming down, and any sign of weeping on there could mean that you're in need of having your coolant crossover pipes replaced. The whole thing is quite labour intensive and will set you back around £1,000. The next thing I want to mention, and it's something I've learned after owning this car. Yes, I live on a wonderful seaside resort, but that doesn't come without its drawbacks. The salty air and the salt they throw around on our roads every single year mean that rust does tend to set in. And I've mentioned this in a previous video, but rust has started to set in just on the edge there and a little bit towards the back. So definitely rust is worth checking out. Make sure the car is not starting to rot here, and if it is, budget for a little bit of paintwork and maybe some mud guards to prevent it happening in the future. The next thing I want to talk about is servicing. A major part of running these cars is servicing them correctly, and if you were to follow the manufacturer's service schedule, it would tell you that the car needs to be serviced every 20,000 miles or 2 years. And in my humble opinion, I feel that that is just far too long between services. The amount of miles I cover in this and the driving style that I tend to have means that I think the oil would be had it by the time I came round to changing it. So what I tend to do is a minor service followed by a major and just do it every single year. This car went to a Porsche centre originally all throughout its life before it came to me, and they did follow that 20,000 mile 2-year service. And I think that's why ultimately this car was always going to have bore scoring. So yes, we are going to go there. We're going to talk about it. the biggest issue that affects these cars, and it's the thing that puts people off buying them more than anything else, and that is bore scoring. This car was only into my ownership by around 2 years when I noticed it had this terrible thing. It resulted in a full engine rebuild, new liners, new pistons, and ultimately a £10,000 bill. But there are a few things that I noticed along the way which led me to the conclusion that the car was ruined. And the first was its oil consumption. Now, I understand that a lot of you will be saying that in the book it tells you that 1 litre per 1,000 kilometres is well within tolerance. It is, but this car was burning around about that before it slowly crept up to above the tolerance. Now it burns nothing. So I don't think these cars really do burn that much oil when they're working correctly. And maybe that was just early signs of bore scoring. The second is a cloud of blue smoke. Again, all over the forums, all over the internet, people will tell you that's normal. The flat engine means the oil pools in the cylinders, on startup, boots it out, and you get a nice cloud of blue smoke. It's not true of this car anymore, and this car has had a full engine rebuild and a new AOS. And it's the AOS that makes people think that there's nothing wrong with the car. They think it's the AOS. Less than 100 quid for the part, they swap it out thinking they've solved the problem. But they haven't. The blue smoke continues, they get told it's part of the ownership of the car, it's the design of the engine, and before long, the whole car is ruined. And that's exactly what happened to this one. Replacing the AOS and throwing parts at the car will only prolong the inevitable. The car will ultimately have bore scoring. Any amount of blue smoke coming out the back of these is not normal because now it produces nothing. And not only that, it uses no oil either. Other than that, there weren't really any other symptoms. Until the progression of the bore score had got worse, there wasn't any other symptoms. On driving it to the garage to get it replaced, however, it started to drop cylinders and do all sorts of crazy things. Since then, the car has been running perfectly. And for those who ask, yes, it's fitted with steel liners. And so far, so good. Inside these cars, there's only a couple of things to look out for. The first, something that's not affected this car, but I hear a lot of you have had the issue, and that's the headliner sagging. This one is lovely and tight, and from what I've heard, it really only affects cars in hotter climates. So although I whinge about the weather here in the UK, it looks like it helps when it comes to the headliner staying in place. But it's definitely worth looking for. It just starts to drop. Apparently it's really expensive and a right pain to put it right, so keep an eye on that one when you're looking at the Porsche Cayman. The next thing, and it's something that did affect this car, and it's the shifter. So my shifter, this is being a Tiptronic, got really stiff, and it just got progressively stiffer and stiffer, and it was just a nightmare to put it into park. Sometimes I wouldn't even go into park, it was that stiff. What that is a little linkage on the gearbox. That all gets seized up and all manky, and you simply can't put it into gear. That part was around 80 quid and had it replaced, and it's literally like brand new. It's amazing now. So that's something to look for. If you have a sticky shifter, then it probably is that as well. In the manual cars, they have issues with the cables stretching, so that's another separate issue. But again, any sort of tightness in the gearbox or any reluctancy to go into gear, then you need to be budgeting for having that sorted, or at least knocking the car down in price. Another often overlooked thing with these cars is underneath here, right next to the battery. There are 2 drains, one at each side. It's where water drains from the windscreen and from the outside of the car, goes through the drains and hits the floor. These tend to get blocked with leaves, and if you don't keep them clear, you get soggy carpets. And that is a complete nightmare to sort out. The carpets having all the soundproofing underneath means it would take weeks to dry out, and you probably would never really get rid of that fusty smell. So it's probably worth making sure these 2 drains are clear to prevent this awful thing happening where water pours into the car just for the sake of a few leaves blocking some drains. The best piece of advice I can give anyone is to do your research, and if possible, get a pre-purchase inspection on the car. Now that's easier said than done. There's no way on earth a garage selling a car is going to let you turn up with a mechanic and start pulling it to bits to make sure it's not got bore scoring. But there are a few checks you can do, as with any car, that's going to minimise the risk of anything potentially being disastrously wrong with the car. So if possible, take a mechanic along with you, get it checked out, make sure there's nothing obvious, no leaks, no rattles. On the road test, make sure that you don't hear anything knocking underneath the car. These cars are fairly quiet to drive, apart from my booming exhaust. They don't rattle, they don't have any knocking noises, They are generally really well put together and very reliable. So any sort of weird noises should raise alarm bells. And other than that, it's just a case of accepting that these cars are very, very old. They're nearly 20 years old now. And you need to have a contingency fund, and that's probably the biggest advice I can give anyone that's looking to buy one of these. Have around £2,000 to £4,000 a year set aside for unexpected bills, maintenance, and just keeping it in good condition. Because when something breaks on one of these, it's very expensive to put it right. And when something is starting to look a little bit tired, like the paintwork, you need to keep maintaining it. And if you do that, the value of the car will stay the same. I've barely lost any money on this car, and it's something that I tell myself daily. Every time I have to spend money on it, I think, well, at least I haven't lost any in depreciation. Other people would buy a brand new Ford Focus or a brand new Vauxhall Corsa and lose thousands of pounds straight away. Whereas this kind of holds its value. It hit rock bottom and it only seems to be creeping up now, which is quite nice and it's reassuring. But it only maintains that value if the car is looked after properly, serviced properly, maintained, and anything that makes a funny noise and anything that's worn out gets replaced. You shouldn't have too many issues at all. They are generally very reliable cars. Aside from the bore scoring, coolant pipes and bits and bobs, the car's never actually let me down. Starts every time, and it's not had any mechanical issues that's caused me to not be able to get where I'm going. There have just been a few issues where I've needed to sort them out, and those things have been very expensive, and I've been probably quite unlucky. But overall, the car has been reliable, and I wouldn't let it put anyone else off buying one of these. The last thing you might want to consider doing before buying one of these cars is quite simply buying this book by Jeff Lehman. He's kindly sent me the book, and it's all about Porsche Cayman 987s and Boxsters. A buyer's guide, some stories, some good and some bad, to help make the buying process so much easier for you. I've got a couple of these books to give away, so if you drop into the comments below whether you prefer Boxster or a Cayman, I'll enter your name into a random generator to win one of these 2 copies of books to be sent out to you. But yeah, thanks Jeff for sending me out this book. It's been really helpful in putting together this revisited buyer's guide that I've done today. Everything I've learned over the last 4 years and 40,000 miles, and what it's like to own one of these amazing cars. I don't want it to put anyone off, and I don't want it to put anyone off owning the 3.4. I genuinely do think it's a good, reliable car. You just have to be prepared to spend the money when it needs it. That is the ultimate key with it. But what you'll end up with is a car that's about as good as you're going to get for the money. And I don't regret any bit of money I've spent on the car. In fact, I'd say it was pretty good value still, because when it sounds like this, and it looks as good as it does, I mean, what else could you buy for this kind of money? There isn't anything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.